Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Ben Thompson. I've been going to Gaza since 2013 as part of my humanitarian work that I've done in a variety of locations. I've been to Gaza twice during the current genocide, in March 2024, and then again most recently in September and October 2025. And I want to talk a little bit about my most recent trip, what I was doing, what I saw, but most importantly, why each of us in this room is going to do something that's going to make a difference on the ground in Palestine. Okay? I start with a picture of a Palestinian man, and this is not a typical picture that we see at charity events. We often speak of women and children, and we should. But the Palestinian man has faced a similar amount of horror, not just during the genocide, but also from the decades of Israeli occupation, siege, and blockade that predated October 2023. This man, he's a malnourished shell of himself, trying to survive a famine by giving everything he has to his two remaining children. You can see he's skin and bone. He admitted to me that in the year prior, he had lost 40 kilograms. He used to work in Rafah, and I'm going to show you some pictures of Rafah tonight. He used to work as an engineer in Rafah, but his house was bombed. His wife and all but two of his children were killed. Left him to care for himself and his two remaining sons with no income, and everything he owned destroyed in the home that was bombed. This is where that man lives. This is where Muhammad lives, in Khan Yunis. Everyone who has had a home bombed now lives in a tent. It's typically children who leave the tent in the morning to find water and food. Parents try to find work, try to rebuild their lives. But the average person in Gaza right now has access to about 2 or 3 liters of water per day. Now, let me give you an idea what that is. The international minimum standard in humanitarian health is 15 liters. And the average person in this room uses about 220 liters of water a day. Okay? Now, despite the lack of coverage in the media, there is still a famine in Gaza. Most people have 1 or less meals per day. This obviously impacts child development. Most children have also been out of school for 2 years. This is where I stayed. This is the Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. I was in Gaza tasked to work with the World Health Organization to improve outcomes for people in Gaza with conditions called non-communicable diseases. You can think of this as chronic conditions like heart disease, lung disease, cancer, and of course, kidney disease. This is the area right in front of the emergency room at Al-Aqsa Hospital, and I had to wait until my second to last day to take this picture at 3 a.m. because this area is never empty like this. It's always full of deliveries of bombed and shot people. Often, reporters are standing in front of this area doing media. And as you enter the reporter's tent, which is where I took this photo from, you are reminded on the right-hand side by the brave, heroic journalists in Gaza who literally risked their lives trying to tell the truth of the genocide in Gaza. Many of them have been killed. And this poster reminds us of this as we enter the tent. While I stayed at Al-Aqsa Hospital, my work with the World Health Organization took me to Nasser, Zawaida, Al-Aqsa, and some other health facilities. I wasn't permitted to go to northern Gaza. At the time, no one was. All the hospitals there have been destroyed or were under siege by the Israeli genocidal forces. This here is Nasser Hospital. It's the area, what you're seeing is a horrific collection of ambulances that have happened because of being targeted by Israel. The locals call this the ambulance graveyard. and you can see behind it is Nasser Hospital. Now, you might ask, why on earth am I showing, what is this on the right? Why am I showing you this? And I'm going to tell you it's a beautiful picture. I think these two pictures reflect the typical Gaza or Palestinian response to destruction. It's an act of courage, an act of resistance, an act of beauty. On the right is a photograph of a frame of a hospital bed. It's a lot more than that. Okay? That was made in Gaza in 2024 during the genocide from metal recycled from the destruction perpetrated by Israel on homes, schools, mosques, hospitals, and of course ambulances. Nasser Hospital in the background here currently has over 700 patients admitted there, despite the fact that when it was built, it was designed for 120 patients. The area that's shown here, just to the left of this, is where in April 2024, after the Israeli genocidal forces left the area, Gaza hospital directors found a mass grave. Over 300 Palestinian people in that mass grave, many of whom had their hands and feet bound when they were shot and then buried. The area that's shown here was also the area that Israel held with tanks in August of 2025. They bombed the hospital, then tank shelled it. Over 30 people were killed, and 5 of them were journalists. Now, I was here meeting with health authorities and many of the health workers working in this healthcare facility to identify challenges with their work and how to optimize services. Along that assessment journey, I spent about 50% of my time doing administrative things like meetings, writing reports. That's the least exciting thing that I could talk about today. And the other half of the time was seeing patients, so I could better understand what was happening firsthand. And what I'm showing you here is simply horrifying. These are CAT scan images belonging to a 19-year-old Palestinian named Ihab. He had left his tent with his cousin to get food aid for his family. He went to one of the sites run by GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a inappropriately named non-humanitarian group run by Israel and the United States. And it was at that site, while he was waiting for food aid, that he was shot in the shoulder by an Israeli sniper. As so many other young men and boys have experienced before and after him, many of whom I saw very recently. I saw many of these injuries. Now, Ehab was lucky enough to survive, but the bullet went in through the back of his right shoulder. Now, locals in Gaza refer to this type of bullet that Israel uses at these aid sites as a bomb bullet. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It means it enters the skin and then separates into multiple fragments that move in an unpredictable pattern. So I've seen my fair share of gunshot injuries in over 10 years of doing humanitarian work. Typically, there's an entry wound and an exit wound. It is not uncommon with these types of bullets, the bomb bullets, to not have an exit wound. Okay? So what happened in Ehab, the bullet went in to the back of the right shoulder. There was no exit wound. You can see on the right-hand side is like he's standing like this, and he's getting a CAT scan like this. And so when you look on the right-hand side, the very bright portions, those are bullet fragments right next to his spine. The picture on the left, the central part is actually one of his thoracic vertebrae. There is a large bullet fragment lodged into his spine. Another fragment of the bullet went up to the right brachial plexus. That's the area of nerves close to the neck that come down and allow you to use your arm. So what does that mean for Ehab? It means that for the crime of trying to get aid for his family, he is now, for the rest of his life, unable to walk, unable to use his right arm, unable to feed himself, unable to wash himself. He will need assistance every time he urinates, every time he defecates, every time he gets dressed for the rest of his life. Now, there's a Canadian part of this. A request for evacuation for Ehab from Gaza has already been placed so that he might go somewhere that he could receive surgery to remove the bullet and optimize chances of being able to walk again. This request was declined by Israel, as anyone who's between the ages of 18 and 64 who's male in Gaza is considered military age and almost automatically rejected for additional care. So during his hospitalization, he's already lost 20 kilograms because, like everyone in Gaza, he's lucky to have one meal a day in a famine. And in another twist of his case, he has a brother in Ottawa. That brother petitioned the Canadian government to have Ehab moved to Canada, where his brother was willing to take care of him. The Canadian government, of course, refused. And in that refusal, they explained that Ehab would need biometrics done. The Canadian government knows very well biometrics are not available in Gaza. They did not need biometrics for Ukrainian refugees coming here, but they need it for Ehab, who literally can't walk even if they had biometrics in Gaza. This is another patient I met, and I should note that I'm not showing faces of patients I saw. These pictures are being used for the purposes of war crimes testimonies and are being submitted to the ICJ with further details, but patients were only willing to provide these pictures without their face, of course, because they're worried about retribution for themselves and their families from Israel. This is a woman who was living in northern Gaza when her house was bombed, instantly killing her husband and all but one of her children. She was stuck under the rubble for 2 days and eventually was pulled out by the amazing civil response teams that risked their lives to support their community. When she was pulled out of the rubble, one of her leg bones, the tibia, that's the one right here at the front, it was sticking out of her leg. Okay? You can see in the picture, now this is my phone taking a picture of a picture, and you can see the picture that I took a picture of is cracked. So I took a picture of this on the family's phone. This is an x-ray. And so, as it turns out, this happened in northern Gaza. All the hospitals in northern Gaza have been destroyed. The Indonesian hospital, Kamal Adwan hospital, they're done. They're bombed, they're destroyed. So she would like to have got an ambulance to go to a hospital that was open, but ambulances no longer respond to northern Gaza. Why? Because they get bombed by Israeli drones. So her one surviving family member, her son, and her walked. And I say walked, they actually walked with her bone sticking out of her leg to Shifa Hospital, okay, a little bit south. Most of this walk was probably her son carrying her. It took a couple days. By the time she got to Shifa Hospital, it was determined that she was in kidney failure, in addition to needing urgent surgery for her leg. Likely, and kidney failure is remarkably common in these instances, it's related to a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is related to crush injuries. When something falls on you and tissue dies, that often causes acute kidney injury. She was quickly in Shifa Hospital put on dialysis. Okay? But by the time she finished dialysis, the Israeli genocidal forces had instructed everyone in the hospital to be evacuated. So she and her son took a wheelchair from Shifa Hospital. She got in the wheelchair, and her son pushed her with her still open leg fracture to Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is where I met her. When she arrived to Al-Aqsa, her bone was still sticking out of her leg. She still needed urgent surgery. She also needed urgent dialysis again. So I organized her urgent dialysis, during which time she wasn't at that point in agony. I think the endorphins probably silenced that. She was actually making jokes with me, talking about how, oh, I think I'll get used to this. Oh, I think it looks nice. And I think that she did that mostly because she probably saw the look on my face and the look on her son's face and wanted to reassure us. It wasn't for her, I think it was actually for us. Now she ended up having surgery, and you can see now her left leg is on the pillow of the wheelchair that she took from Shifa Hospital. So she too had no access to shelter, water, or food during her journey, and now lives in a tent about 250 meters from the hospital with her son. Now this might be a little bit confusing, this set of pictures. There's 3 pictures here. The picture on the left is the view from the 3rd floor of the Al-Aqsa Hospital, where I stayed. And you can think about this hospital really as having 3 sides of a square. So there's buildings kind of like this, and in the middle of that central part of that square normally was where parking would be, or people would, the community or family members would come. But now that place is completely filled with tents that have expanded this hospital for an additional 250 patients, the overwhelming majority of whom are trauma injuries. The entire hospital is meant to have only 200 patients in it, but has been expanded partially, and now there's over 700 patients in it. Now, the picture on the right is a typical hallway in Al-Aqsa Hospital. What you're seeing is a displaced family taking shelter, and they sleep on the ground in the hospital. They are immediately adjacent, if you go to the emergency room, they are immediately adjacent to patients who are admitted to the floor. So when we were doing mass casualty, it meant that we were doing procedures on patients on the floor, and if there was a pool of blood, almost certainly there was a family living immediately adjacent to it. Which brings me to the man in the middle. Who's that? Well, there's a couple things I want you first to notice right away. He's alone. He's emaciated, very, very skinny. And thirdly, he has no shirt on. It's because he and that wheelchair are 100% of his possessions. This man was admitted to the intensive care unit at Al-Aqsa Hospital when a bomb landed on his home. He was the only one in his family to survive, and ultimately he needed an amputation of his left leg. He was in the intensive care unit, but multiple further mass casualties came and forced him out of the intensive care unit. He was on the ward for a few days and then ultimately was discharged. But where was he going to be discharged to? He has no home, he has no clothes, he has no family. All of his possessions were in the house, now gone. This man didn't even have a tent to go to. So this here is the edge of the hospital grounds. This is as far as he would go every single day. He would go to the edge of the hospital grounds, stay there until he fell asleep in his chair. And then he would eventually come back to the hospital that he'd been discharged from, hoping to get water, food, or to have some kind of social contact. And on the last day I was there, he had befriended one of the local cats. And he was using the very small water ration that he had, and in fact sharing it with his cat. This is the door of a hospital director for a clinic that Government Affairs Canada supported in Deir el-Bala on the left. And yes, those are sniper bullet shots. Just outside the door, you can see the vast tents for hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians, and yet this area, even now, in the supposed ceasefire, is still being bombed. So this reminds me of our responsibilities we have as conscientious citizens. Citizens of a country that is still providing support for Israel through weapons that are killing people in Gaza during the genocide. It reminds me that we must give as much of ourselves to support our brothers and sisters in Gaza and in Palestine. So in addition to our donations, I am 100% certain you will all be very generous tonight, but it also means that anything we can do to end the genocide, whether that's advocacy work, pressuring our health leaders, or politicians to do everything to end this genocide, anything we can do, we must do. It also reminds me, I was in Gaza in March of 2024, and most of my time there was actually in Rafah, which was in the south, and then I was again there just a month ago. So I was asked to talk about the differences between then and now, and I can keep it really simple. Much more of Gaza is destroyed. More than 95% of housing structures are destroyed and uninhabitable. Every single hospital has been targeted and bombed at least once. Every single one. None of them are fully functional. Currently, there's 2 hospitals operating, Nasser and Al-Aqsa, that are functioning nowhere near, fully functional, but they're partially functional. So at the top, this is Rafah in March 2024. This was a tent city that housed hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Soon after this picture was taken, the bombings in this area started up again, and thousands of people living here were killed. What does Rafah look like now?
This is not the Rafa I remember. It's not the Rafa I remember. Dust. Just dust.
And yet, there is progress to be made. And in our visit, we made progress. The amazing health workers in Gaza, they're working long hours, often with their family members having been killed. They live on 1 meal a day, and they go home to a tent. They're really the real heroes in this story. And what it tells me is that whatever we give today, people in Gaza will convert it into miracles. They'll convert it into hope. They'll convert it into something beautiful. I've seen it before. This is myself and one of my surgical nurse friends. I was training local staff in a couple procedures that can help support patients with certain kidney conditions or other chronic conditions. And it would normally take me about a year to train people in Canada to do these procedures competently, to do it independently. And in under a week, they were doing it better than me. So it just so happened the hospital where this training happened and the hospital where I was staying was bombed. It was bombed while I was there. 2 people were killed instantly. And it just so happened on that day that many of the people who were as part of the international health group had gone to Nasser Hospital to help train the local physicians, leaving myself and one other international physician and some residents to deal with the mass casualty. Now, we went down, and there was a man who had been brought in, carried by his shoulders, because a piece of shrapnel had cut off both of his legs. Okay? That was the only man, the only person who survived that bombing. And he ultimately did pass away. So I'm going to tell you again, what we do tonight as far as donations, every penny you give will be converted into miracles and will save lives. But when you leave here, if you're donating tonight, I want you to think also, what can you do to end this genocide? A ceasefire does not end the genocide. There's still a famine. There's still a humanitarian crisis. There is still a genocide, and the Canadian government is still complicit in this. Anything you can do, anything, it needs to be done now. I'm going to leave you with this. These are the children of Gaza. And you can see here, they've been out of school for 2 years. They're lucky to have a meal a day. They live with minimal water. Many of them don't have basic necessities. They need health care. And they're living amongst the ruins, but from it, they will create beauty. The amount of aid that is required to support our brothers and sisters is enormous. The work that humanity does, it literally saves lives. And you can see it. Whether you're supporting water, food, reconstruction of homes, whatever you give tonight will be put to good use. I ask you, please give generously. Please think about how you can support the people of Gaza with donations and in other ways. Inshallah, tomorrow we will bring peace, justice, and freedom for the Palestinian people. Shukran.